The other night I'm asleep in my apartment. I hear my front door open, but just figure it's my sister coming over to crash on my couch. She got in a fight with her boyfriend. Happens sort of regularly. She's the only one with a key to my apartment. I heard her moving around and figured she was just getting settled and making something to eat. I go back to sleep and think nothing of it. Wake up the next morning for work, and she's not there. Weird since it was 5 a.m., so I text and ask if she came over. She says no. Was home alone and maybe 12 years old. A really annoying boy from my neighborhood liked me, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. My parents left to go somewhere and I was sleeping. I was woken up by the phone ringing. It was a prank phone call saying all sorts of nasty things they wanted to do to me. I just hung up. It was the mid-80s. As soon as I was back in my bedroom, unsettled by the call, this crappy boy knocked on my window and scared the living shit out of me. I've never been so happy to see my parents as I was that day. I was living in my first apartment alone in college in 2015. It was a Friday night and I was on Skype playing video games with friends. It was like midnight, and there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw someone from my complex I had spoken to a few times on the other side of the door looking nervous and scared. I opened the door but kept the door chains on and asked him what was going on. He told me someone was passed out on the stairs and looked sick, and he had heard me talking on my Skype call through the door, so he knocked on my door for help. I went out into the hall with him, and he showed me the person passed out in the stairs. It was my across-the-hall neighbor. He was obviously very, very drunk. The other guy at the complex reached down to help him up, and the neighbor pulled a messy swing at him. Missed completely. We talked him down and managed to get him up the stairs to his door, the drunk guy throwing sloppy swings every now and again at us. He took like 10 minutes finding the right key for his door. Every time we tried to help him, he would get angry and try to punch us. He got into his apartment, closed and locked the door, and we heard him collapse on the ground on the other side. We called the non-emergency line wondering if this guy had alcohol poisoning or if he had drove home. No one was with him, so we had no idea how he got back home, and he seemed drunk enough for it to be bad. Non-emergency came out and banged on the door for a good while before the drunk guy managed to unlock it, and I heard an ambulance come, and they took the drunk man to the hospital. I received a call from the police the next day saying he had to be hospitalized, and his stomach pumped because of alcohol poisoning. Me and that other guy probably saved his life by helping him and getting him taken to a hospital. However, they also found a gun on this man. He was a criminal and not supposed to own a firearm, and definitely did not have a permit to carry it around. He came back with it on him from wherever he was drinking. The cops said it was probably a good thing he was as drunk as he was because he forgot he had a gun on him. So he was throwing sloppy punches instead of pulling a gun on us when he was consistently angry at us through the encounter. I definitely could have died that night. Several years ago, I was woken by a loud pounding sound around 2 a.m. I woke my husband and we searched the house, turning on lights as we went, but we avoided the kids' room, as we didn't want to wake them if we didn't have to. We got to the other end of the house and hadn't seen anything unusual or heard the pounding again. But then we heard it again, and we knew it came from the kids' room. Mama Bear came out and tore down the hall. We lived in Salt Lake City at the time, and it was shortly after Elizabeth Smart was abducted, so I was terrified. The door to the room was blocked shut. I was sure there were at least 2 adults in the room stealing my kids. When we finally got the door open to crack, it turned out, not so much. My then 18-month-old had climbed out of his crib and had wedged his bum up against the door, and he was fast asleep lying on the floor with his legs propped up against the door, and every once in a while he'd kick the door, again, in his sleep. I think that's the most afraid I've been in my own home. After separating from my husband, I rented a little house in the country for my 3-year-old son and myself, so not home alone, but kind of. It was the perfect little place for my budget, but it was very secluded. There were no neighbors for miles. The main road connecting two small towns passed in front of the house. Though the road saw very little traffic, I was concerned my son would get out and be hit by a car. I was diligent about latching the screen during the summer to keep my little one in. One afternoon after playing in the yard, I set my son up with the toys in the front room, then went to the back to make dinner. I'd just started boiling water for the pasta when I heard the screen door slam. I'd forgotten to latch the screen. I turned from the stove, calling out to my son. I thought he'd gone outside. The yard was big, and I thought I'd be able to scoop him up before he reached the road. I ran out of the kitchen. That's when I saw my son, standing between me and the stranger in my living room. I was paralyzed. My throat began to close, and I didn't know if I'd be able to speak. The man was very thin and dirty. He looked as if he'd spent the day under a car or in a ditch. Every scary hitchhiker movie came to mind as I raced to process what was happening. My sweet little boy was holding his toy train up to the man as if to offer him a turn with it. I didn't know if he was there to take my son, to hurt us, to rub us. I just knew we were alone, and even if I could get to my phone and dial 911, it'd take far too long for anyone to get to us. The man said, "I'm not going to hurt you. Your son let me in. I didn't mean to scare you. I'll leave." He walked out. I grabbed my son and ran to the bathroom, the only room in the house with a door that locked. I held him on my lap and tried to keep my body from shaking. I said, "Honey, remember Mommy said we don't talk to strangers?" My sweet little guy said, "He wasn't a stranger, he was at our house."